Hello, everyone. Welcome to night 15 of the Orphan's Tales live reading series. Hey, nice to see people coming online. It is so windy here. It's just completely ridiculous. If you can hear it, I apologize. It is so loud. There are over 50-mile-an-hour winds on the island here tonight, and it is nuts out there. I don't think I ever really understood the meaning of a howling wind until I moved to New England, and I get it now. Oh, it's okay if you miss nights. They're all up in the archive on my YouTube channel, so you can catch up anytime. Last night was very exciting because we had a special guest star in S.J. Tucker, who came and sang Snake Star Song for us. I forgot to hit play on the music before I started this because I'm a professional. So you can find her music at sjtucker.com and usually opening any one of these readings. I'll show you all my crazy cup. It's my my pipe, my Sherlock Holmes pipe, only it has alcohol in it. This was a Christmas gift from my sister-in-law, and I keep meaning to bring it on stream, but I'm out of wine. So we've had to move on to cocktails. Welcome. Let's do our housekeeping while everyone's here. As usual, for legal reasons, this is not an audiobook, this is a play. It is a one-woman show and most definitely a performance and not an audio version in any way. You can find S.J. Tucker, the wonderful musician, at sjtucker.com, as I said. You can subscribe to my Patreon at Kat Valenti. You can follow me at Kat Valenti on Twitter. There is a tip jar in my Instagram profile as well as on my website at katherinemvalenti.com. Deeply appreciate anybody who contributes in any way as times are tight around here. It's absolutely not required though, so please just enjoy this and don't worry about it if you can't afford it, and I very much understand if you can't. Thank you so much to Joe, Deb, and Stephanie for tipping me last night, and I will thank anybody who does by name in the next stream. So it's so hot in here. It's usually freezing, so I'm hunched over, but for once I'm very warm. Yesterday I cooked everything in the universe in order to distract myself from the horror. Today I cleaned. Turns out cleaning is a little rougher on the body than cooking, so my back hurts so bad. I'll be surprised if I can get up out of the chair at the end of this reading. It is really intense. But the show must go on. As far as things that I remember about the Orphan's Tales that have come up, it occurred to me as I was getting ready today that I mean, this may not be a particular revelation, but as I've explained a couple of times, I originally wrote this as 4 books. Each of them, and they are each of them about 70 to 80,000 words long. And so I think the last 2 are even more, but I don't remember those exact word counts. They don't matter. But the publisher decided to package it as a duology, which is fine. But each of them was meant to represent one of the 4 elements, which is the kind of thing you think is very unique and deep when you're 22. But it was meaningful to me then. And so the one we're reading is the Earth book. The other half of this volume is the Water, Book of the Sea, very subtle. And Air and Fire are in the cities of Coin and Spice. So that's my little liner notes for this evening. Now, we've got some big revelations coming, so let's get started and see if we can get all the way through to the big reveal tonight. A big reveal. The Witch's Tale continued. I'm actually just going to go back and read the paragraph from last night, just so that we move in slowly. I usually try to end these at the end of a tale, and I didn't last night because of the Suge thing, so we're a little partway into the chapter. I'm just going to read the previous paragraph. The barbacoa was amazing. I will be making it many, many times. All right. The Witch's Tale continued. So you see, if you are quiet and patient, you may be able to get your petty revenge after all. It is none of my business. The king is as stupid as he is coarse, and when I have what I want from you, I would consider it a favor if you would kill him. Release me from my service here as Indrajit's death released me then. Hatch your plots in the darkness, for the darkness is all you have. He turned from his table with a cup of the thick drink, now green and black as moldy flesh. He smiled, a smile which might have been taken as tender or proud had it been on any face but his. The wizard hauled me up by my hair and yanked the gag from my mouth. He forced the brew down my throat. It tasted of bile and rotted flowers, roses perhaps, and there was a dark, musty undertaste that might have been sweat from some unnameable body. As soon as it was in me, roiling in my belly, he flung me aside and watched with the curiosity of a cat watching a mouse it knows it is about to devour. I screamed and clutched at my skin. A terrible golden cloud had swallowed my vision, my skin ripping apart like the pages of his foul books. I knelt on the floor and vomited twice, still shrieking into the stones. He never reached a hand to help me, only watched as my skin was stolen away. I must eventually have fainted. When I came to, he held up a great mirror with a cruel smile of victory on his thin lips. In the carved mirror stood a tall woman with hair the color of young wheat cascading past her waist in glowing curls, wide gray eyes like pools of clean rain, and milk skin without the slightest mark. I was tall, my breasts rode high and full, and there was no knot or rope of muscle anywhere on me. I was weak and soft as a lamb at suck. And now, the wizard crooned silkily, we will call you queen. Seeing my expression, he laughed. You cannot think I meant for my king to lie with a barbarian. Metamorphosis is my art. Now you are beautiful. Now he can show you to the crowds. Now you cannot return to your people, for they would never know you. You belong to us. We will call you Helia, after the great sun which rides in the sky and blesses the reign of our king. You cannot take my name from me, slave, I said softly, touching that hair, the likes of which I had never seen save on the golden horses of my youth. My queen, I have taken it. I spent the nights by turns with the king and his soundless cruelties, for he hardly spoke a word to me after our hurried marriage in a temple I could not name, when he clasped a belt of gold and jasper about my waist in place of a ring. He seemed to marvel that it fit perfectly. The other nights I was bound in Omir's chamber, while he bled me in order to leech power grandmother had given me from my veins. He opened me with silver needles and gold, even grotesque thorns the size of a well-muscled arm. But it was not deep enough. The blood never ran silver. Perhaps I had nothing after all. Perhaps I was as empty as a hole in the air. He would not listen when I told him I was nothing, only an apprentice who would never be otherwise. He had taken the moon from me and given me only a sun that burned and burned. But I spent every day in my tower prison. Even when I was pregnant, I had no respite, but lay on the stone flags as though dead, listening to the dripping of my blood into the crack of the floor. Yet all the kingdoms rejoiced when I gave birth to my son, named for the lions of the wild steppes, and only then, when I had produced an heir, was I allowed an hour a day when I could hold him in free arms and let my tears fall on his smooth forehead. The tale of the prince and the goose continued. Leander stared, his hands shaking, his mouth dry. The birds watched him like an exceptionally slow child who has just learned to throw a ball into the air and catch it without dropping it. Helia, he whispered. I would have thought you'd figure it out sooner. Nevertheless, all revelations are, in the end, disappointing. Did you think it was by accident your adventure took you to me? You had hardly to turn the corner and I was there. Surely you expected to get a little further on your way before meeting a witch. I have waited just beyond your father's reach all these years. I knew no son of mine could be bound up in a castle all his life and never try to run free. I have bent all my heart on the thought, as though I were crafting a bow to let arrows fly to you. I did not quite think, though, that your first act, once you arrived, would be to murder your sister. Perhaps it was only then that Leander realized the full impact of the witch's tale, and his eyes broke like webs in the wind. He cried in earnest then for his sister, for his mother, and his father, whose crimes he had never guessed. But I can bring her back. With the skin, I can bring her back. Yes, yes, my son, but not yet. It is not time, and there is more yet to tell. She reached awkwardly out to draw him into her. Knife's embrace was as strange as unpracticed as a tiger embracing a seal. And into his ear she whispered, voice rattling like cattails. Your father organized a great festival for the first anniversary of your birth. As part of the celebration, the dungeons were to be cleared out, the remaining prisoners, starved like deer at the bottom of winter, to be executed, all the poor, wretched folk who were left of my tribe. I, of course, was not invited to the festival or the execution. The witch's tale continued. The court gleamed like a great iced cake, and you were bounced on 100 shoulders, kissed by 1,000 lips while I lay bound in golden cords in the tower. But when the night was full as a sail, and everyone had drunk as much wine as goats will gobble their bearded nanny's milk, I cut my ropes on a sharp stone, and tucking the rough blade into my dress, crept out of the tower, down those old familiar stairs, one last time into the dark of the prisons where Eerie was born. They looked out at me, terrified, from their cells. I was a stranger to them, hideous as a ghoul in all my various shades of gold. I had to speak softly to tell them I was not the queen at all, but their own knife, and as their knife, I would cut them free. They did not believe it. That ragged child who chewed raw meat and scampered after crows to catch their feathers could not be draped in silk and smell of violets growing in soft moss. They asked me how to tell a doe's prints from a stag's, how many wildcats I had killed before my marriage, and what my grandmother's name had been, and both my sisters. I answered them all, and one by one I broke their locks until they sat quivering around me like a flock of wild birds. Only some 40 of them were left, of all our hundreds of warriors. I can't let you go under the king's axe like cattle tomorrow. I can buy your lives at a better price than that. Only, I'm not sure I can. The wizard cut me, and there was nothing. I don't know, but I will try. I will try. Come closer. I think I must be able to touch you. They pressed me heavily. The smell of their sweat and dying penetrated me like slow poison. All those faces, cheekbones sharp and high, all those eyes, all those bony fingers grabbing at me. They did not know what they reached for, only that they reached for me, their knife, and for salvation. I closed my eyes and spoke in my heart to the black mare who fold the stars in the beginning of the world. I begged her for the power to which I had no right, for light which was not mine. Slowly, I took the sharp stone and dug at my breast, cutting through the skin and into the meat of myself as deep as I could stand it. And the blood flowed, red and darker, but not silver. Never silver. I cut deeper, driving the rock into myself until I could hear it scrape the bone. I cried out, and my voice echoed in the dark, an echo of an echo, of all my cries when my daughter was born, of all my cries when I let her go. Something pale dribbled from me, small drops like pearls, nothing like my grandmother's wealth of light, but it was there, at the bottom of my body. My tribe huddled around me as though my body alone could keep them warm. I bent low and showed them that they had to taste it. They had to suckle at me as a dying woman in the desert will suckle at the blood of her horse to survive. One by one, they took their few drops, and as they did, I became weaker and weaker, for 40 men and women can drink a great deal when they are frightened. I was faint and wobbling on my heels, crouched among them, and one by one I took their frail bodies into my hands and shaped them as I had seen grandmother do, shaped them like clay on a stone table. They changed, more slowly than Airy had, since I was so weak, since I did not have the light of the cave and the stars. But the great silver wings came, the beaks lengthened from their lips, their legs disappeared under pale down. One by one they staggered upright and squeezed between the window bars, into the night scented with festival fireworks, the moon under their wings, honking under the stars. And I sat in the damp trickle of the dungeon, sobbing and laughing, skin flaming with light, my arms flung out to them as they spiraled up and up and up. And here we have another lovely illustration of the geese flying free. The tale of the prince and the goose continued. Leander felt the heat and weight of dozens of black eyes on him. The wild geese that had formed his mother's bed linen stared at him with a disconcerting light full of veiled secrets. Knife stroked their long necks. You know the rest. I was punished. You were taken from me and given over to my maid, but she ran from my pyre and saw nothing. When I was left to burn, my flock came and braved the licking flames to cut me loose and bear me away to the forest. Those poor things. They could hold no part of their own selves in these feathered bodies. They didn't know why they did it, why they were compelled to dive into the fire. Some died, but they did. They knew only that they loved me and could not be apart from me. And so we are a tribe again after all. Leander shut his eyes against the gazes of all those long-necked creatures. And now we come to it, my son, she said, crossing her arms over her broad chest. I told you you might prefer death to any salvation I might offer. I could not buy my people's vengeance, only their lives. You must purchase a better end than I. When a knife is buried in your father's chest, then I shall count myself satisfied and you forgiven, and you must swear it to me. He had thought her price would be terrible somehow, that he would not already burn with a desire to avenge this hut of birds. He felt no hesitation, only relief that he could at last do something for them. Leander placed his arms over his mother, smelling her wild, sharp scent and feeling her thick bones under his hands. After all he had heard, he could not swear other than this, and murmured his assent. She clapped her hands behind his back and pushed him off of her. Well then, I think the moon has risen, and you may wrap your poor sister in her skin so she may be whole. Don't forget to keep the skin on her. Tie it close to her, or it will be for nothing. Make it tight, for she will have to break out of it with her own strength or not at all. It is magic. You should do it, not I. The witch coughed hoarsely and spat. I will do it. I am her mother. You will manage the grass and leaves, boy, and I will manage the blood. In the garden. The boy stared at the girl, her face framed by an explosion of white stars trailing in the sky like sea foam. Her eyes were shut. She was enchanted by her own voice, which moved back and forth across his skin like a violin bow. If she had asked him to sprout Ares' own wings and fly from the tower, he would have leapt from the window if it meant she would never stop speaking. Mesmerized by her cloaked eyes and the waterfall of her shadowy hair, he ventured once again to lie beside her on the wide stone sill and place his head in her lap, like a young lion in a tamer's trance. The tale of the prince and the goose continued. Leander looked at his sister's corpse, which, despite his long travels, had not changed at all, had not even begun to rot. She still bore the same pale skin and silver hair, flawless and fair. When he put his hands on her, the flesh was cool, but it had not yet grown hard. The prince wrapped her in the scarlet skin as his mother told him. He made sure her hands were folded against her chest, her hair pulled away from the sticky skin. He tucked her feet up and pulled the red stuff under her. When he tucked the last corner into itself, the whole fleshy shape became hard and round as a red egg, shining like a malevolent star on the summer grass. He sat against a knotted oak, sweating. Knife knelt on the dark grass, setting a bundle wrapped in cloth at her side. Her bones creaked like windows pried open in winter. She stroked the egg, leaned against it, putting her arms around the thing and crooning quietly to it. She shut her eyes, and the prince thought for a moment that she wept, but surely not, surely not. She pulled a long knife out of one of the sheaths at her waist and held it across her lap. She stared at the moon shadow on the metal. The skin is good, my boy. You did very well. But it didn't kill her, so it is not enough only to wrap her up in it and wait for her to wake up. Not enough. The slave never cut deep enough, never enough, and I managed to gouge myself that deeply just once. This time pays for all. Deep enough to bring her back, deep enough to fill her egg with a yolk of starlight, deep enough for my girl to come home. Leander did not understand for a moment, being, as most princes are, reluctant to see things which are not written plainly out before him in 3 kinds of ink. But when she raised her blade, he knew what she meant, and he lunged forward to stop her, but she was much faster than he, and sank the knife in her chest before he could wrench her hand away. "Enough!" she barked, and with a horrible sawing motion laid open her heart over the scarlet egg. The blood flowed into the skin, dark as dungeons, dark as geese eyes. And then it came, the light, first in drops and then in a sickly stream, soaking into the egg like cream strained into a glass. It became white with blood light and glowed lantern bright. Knife slumped against the slick surface and slid to the grass, her body empty as a hole in the sky. Soon the light had drained entirely into the skin and it was dark again, red against the shadowy grass. After a few moments, a terrible sound began to issue from the skinned egg, scratching and weeping, a muffled breathing which was getting fainter. Leander wanted to rip the egg open. He wanted to fall to the ground and mourn his mother. Caught between them, he did nothing, but watched helplessly, his feet knotted to the ground. With a great crack, like the splintering of a palace column, a white hand squirmed out of the egg, clawing for purchase on its slick surface. A girl emerged, her hair strewn with shards of the crimson shell, wet and bright with egg fluid. She pulled herself up with painfully thin limbs. When she stepped onto the grass, she caught sight of her slender foot and froze. She held out her hands, staring dumbfounded at them. Then she spied him standing beneath the tree. Harry opened her human mouth for the first time and screamed so loudly and so horribly that nightingales fell dead from their boughs. She could not stop screaming. Her chest rose and fell swiftly, and her cries filled the night. Leander rushed to her, and she collapsed into his arms, still staring at her hands. He didn't think she could speak. What language could she have, after all? He whispered gently to her, "It's all right, you're safe, it's your brother, it's all right." As she began to struggle against him, he tied the remnants of the skin around her small waist like a lady's sash. She slashed at him with her nails, gibbering and screaming. Only when she saw the body of the witch did she quiet and strain toward it. Still holding her fragile form, he helped her crawl toward the crumpled crone. Aerie stumbled to knife on limbs she could hardly use, crying a single word that told the prince that she knew language and more, the thing the spell was not meant to encompass. She had been awake within that bird body since the first day of her life. Aerie fell into Knife's arms, whimpering in a low and grinding voice, "Mama, Mama, Mama." They lay together on the wet earth, and Knife did not wake. Still, Aerie would not move. Her fingers curled into her mother's hair. Leander's hands curled in hers. One by one, the wild geese hopped out of the door of the old hut, waddling over to Knife and the ruined egg skin. One by one, they laid their pearly heads on her body, all finding a place for themselves on her still warm skin. One by one, they closed their eyes, not to be parted from their mistress at the end. Knife seemed to float in a sea of wings. Each bird's silent death took her further and further from her children. Leander let go of his sister's hand and opened the cloth bundle that sat beside the limbs which had once been Knife. Inside lay a loaf of bread, lumpy and ill-formed, an ugly reddish color baked into the crust. It was not soft, nor did it seem as though it would taste good, but Leander understood. It was his own loaf, kneaded by his broken hand, his blood and his tears folded into it over and over. It had always been meant for this morning. He broke it in half, leaning a shaking, staring Aerie into his arms and slowly pressing tiny morsels into her shuddering mouth. She grimaced, but swallowed as if starving, and he too ate a few pieces of the strange food, the tang bitter on his tongue. After a long while, they walked from their mother into the moonlight. Aerie stood at the well, washing her new hands until they bled. Her brother approached her softly and took her hands in his. They were slick with red, running with it, and her eyes were wild. Aerie, you're hurting yourself. We have to start for the castle. With luck, we can slip in tonight." She shook her head violently, dark hair still splashed with silver light, so she looked like an old woman with gray in her black strands. Her voice was like a crushed tuning fork, the dust of a harp splintered on a desolate shore. "I'm not going. Not there, not to the birth nest." Knife asked us. Mother asked us. She made us swear. You? All right, she made me swear, so I am going. Are you abandoning her now that she's dead? It's my father, not yours. What's the matter? Abandon her. Abandon. She struck her chest with her fist. My mother, my flock. Yes, but this is what my flock does. The flock of princes. We go on quests, we make vows, and sometimes we kill kings. It's our duty. Not mine. Not my hatching, not my duty. She spat the last as though it were dredged from the bottom of her belly, thick with sludge. She looked at her brother, eyes raking up and down his shape. She seemed to calm herself, to collect her mind. You are alone, she whispered. I am alone. Mother was alone. It never changes. I'll tell you why. When I was not I, when I flew. And we will pick up with the Gosling's Tale tomorrow night. Thank you all for listening. If anyone has any questions, I am happy to answer them, though things tend to move pretty quickly at this stage, so type fast. While I have my ridiculous, I can't remember what they're called, this kind of pipe, but my Sherlock Holmes drink. Thank you. It's definitely the big emotional portion of this half of the book. I don't know. It's just such a strange thing to go back and read this book, that I wrote so long ago when I was so young, and recognize, parts of who I would become as a writer and things that I would jettison and characters that I still very much love and feel for. I made them, so I guess I have to. I'm their mom. They've just gone away to graduate school at this point and grown up, gone off to strange climes and done wild things far away from me. If nobody has any questions, I will do our, here we go. Have you checked the name of that lipstick so we can all stop searching for some grandma business by Estee Lauder? This is not grandma business. This is a different one. This is Revlon Black Cherry. And the reason I know that is because it's what I took with me on the Radiance tour. Radiance is a science fiction novel I wrote that's set in this kind of deco-punk 1920s aesthetic, even though it's an alternate history, so it actually takes place in 1986, but their timeline's all screwed up. Anyway, and it's just the most perfect 1920s shade. And I had this big flapper outfit that I wore, and I had a bob wig and everything, and I wore this lipstick every night. I love it. So this is Revlon Black Cherry. I ordered reading glasses because I think I have to, if I'm going to keep doing this every night, wear them. And with those reading glasses, I will look at the Grandma Business by Estee Lauder one and see what it is. Is there a subgenre I've always wanted to write but haven't tried yet? I've always wanted to do a murder mystery. I love murder mysteries. I really grew up on them. And even watching Knives Out, I was like, oh, I want to do something like this. I love it. I love the puzzle aspect of it. I mean, look at the Orphan Tale. I love stories as puzzles and the archness of the genre and everything. So yeah, maybe one of these days I'll try my hand at Agatha Christie drag. No more trees have yet fallen on the house, fingers crossed, and the power held up this whole time. Like I said, it is nuts out there. It's been pouring rain all day, and the wind is just so loud. It's incredible, but I haven't even heard any cracking. It just seems to be a windy night, so hopefully it'll all stay. But I know that some 70,000 people in Maine are still out of power from before, which is crazy. So I don't know. I mean, it's very hard for anybody to get out to houses with everything going on right now. So I hope that our power holds out. Thankfully, I already ordered a lot of fresh candles at the beginning of all of this, so we'll be okay. But it's very, very windy. Oh, yay, you saw the Radiance tour. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, although I gotta say, the first week of a tour, I really enjoy the costume and makeup and performance and everything a lot more than I do after that. Then after 7 days, I'm like, oh, I gotta put it all on again. I have to put on a wig again. You are killing me. Why did I decide this was a good idea? But I'm always committed to my aesthetic. Radiance kind of has a murder mystery. It does. But I mean, just like I use aspects of all genres in all of my books. I try to anyway. But kind of in the way that there's comedy in almost all of my books, but space opera is a comedy. I would like to do a murder mystery, not just a murder mystery contained in one of my other thingies. My mom loved murder mysteries, so I read 1,000 of them growing up. Believe it or not, I'll say a name that probably nobody knows. He was such a big deal in the 80s, but has just not held up. I've read almost everything by Tony Hillerman, and it's all the most cringy, like, Chakotay-style faux Native American stuff. It's really, they're not good books, but my mother owned every single one of them. Bad News Bears. But I have read more murder mysteries than you even want to know about. Plus my grandmother. Everything on my grandmother's shelf. My grandmother, whose incredible name really is in real life, Lou LeMay. Grammy Lou's shelves were romance and murder mysteries, which is pretty much the grandma bookshelf as far as I know. Having picked up some of the romance ones as well as the murder mystery ones, though, I have to say they were a little steamier than one expects one's grandmother's bookshelf to be. Yeah, well, so those are the answers to that question. Black Cherry Revlon. Okay, well, I'll do the outros. For legal purposes, this is not an audiobook. This has been a play. Scene. You can find S.J. Tucker at sjtucker.com and her wonderful music based on these books. You can subscribe to my Patreon at Kat Valenti. You can follow me on Twitter at Kat Valenti. All my Patreon rewards are going to start going up in the next week or two, so now is a great time to get in. There is a tip jar on my Instagram profile as well as on my website at katherinemvalenti.com. And these are absolutely free every night until all this ends. But if you wanted to toss a coin to your witch, it would be deeply appreciated, as times are particularly tight for artists and anybody who works freelance and therefore will not be eligible for basically any program that is meant to help people. So thank you if you can give anything, and I will thank you personally on the next stream. I would totally do a paranormal murder mystery. I don't even know if I'm capable of writing like a realist book where things just happen the way they do in the real world. Gross. Ugh. It's just unnatural. I don't know. I don't even know if I have that in me to do something that doesn't have any aspect of the unusual and out of the ordinary and fantastical, whether that's science fiction, horror, fantasy, whatever. And also, I would love to do a haunted house story too. I was thinking about that the other night, that I love haunted house stories so much. We were listening to Poe, her album Haunted, which is based on a novel. Well, it's not based on, it's very complicated, the relationship between the book and the album, because the author and the singer are brother and sister. But a book called House of Leaves, which is like the most year 2000 book that has ever existed. It came out in the year 2000, and it is just the most late 90s, early 2000s thing that could possibly be made, and I love it. I love House of Leaves so much. So yeah, I would love to do a haunted house book. There's just something about that really appeals to me, and I love haunted house stories and will pretty much read any of them. Though after The Haunting of Hill House came out, the TV series, it's hard to top. The novel was hard to top. I won't say the series topped it, but they're just very, very different. But Kapratic, you know because of Twitter that if you say things like that to me, then they end up as stories. So you have to be very careful when you tell me to write things, because half the time they end up on bestseller lists and being turned into major motion pictures. So you be careful. Thank you all for tuning in tonight for my pipe and my water pipe and my book about sad geese. And tomorrow night I will see you again. Same fairy tale time, same fairy tale channel, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, by the flickering light of my very fake light bulb. I love you all so much. Thank you for sharing your quarantine with me and keeping me a little sane. I hope I keep you a little sane too. We'll rejoin the geese tomorrow. Bye-bye, guys. Have a lovely, lovely evening.